My name is Jessica Walker, and at 32, I thought I'd seen everything during my 8 years as a charge nurse at Jade Mountain Hospital in Greenstone Valley, Oregon. The Pacific Northwest's misty mornings often shrouded our facility in an ethereal calm, but lately, that tranquility felt deceptive. Something was wrong in the cardiac unit, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. It started with small inconsistencies, medication schedules that didn't align with physician orders, patient charts that seemed incomplete during shift changes, and a growing sense that information was slipping through cracks that shouldn't exist. The hospital's Epic system had been our lifeline for years, tracking everything from patient vitals to staff schedules with military precision. But recently, I'd noticed gaps. Critical updates that should have been documented weren't there. Communication between shifts felt fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle deliberately scattered. Chloe Martinez, our nursing informatics specialist, had always been the backbone of our digital infrastructure. She'd been with Jade Mountain for nearly a decade, longer than most of us, and her expertise with the hospital's electronic systems was unquestioned. When new staff struggled with documentation protocols, they went to Chloe. When physicians needed custom reports for patient care conferences, Chloe delivered them flawlessly. She'd covered my shifts during my family emergency last year when my father had a stroke. I trusted her completely then, grateful for her willingness to step in during my darkest hours. That trust had felt unshakable. But trust in healthcare isn't just personal, it's professional survival. Every decision we make ripples through patient care, affecting outcomes in ways that extend far beyond our immediate awareness. The cardiac unit operated on a delicate balance of timing, communication, and absolute accuracy. Even small disruptions could cascade into serious complications. Dr. Patrick Kelly, our unit director, had mentioned concerns during last week's staff meeting. Patient handoffs weren't as smooth as they should be. Critical information seemed to be getting lost between shifts, creating unnecessary confusion for incoming nurses. He'd attributed it to the usual challenges of a busy hospital, but his furrowed brow suggested deeper worries. The morning fog outside seemed thicker than usual as I badged into the unit for another 12-hour shift. The familiar beeping of monitors and quiet conversations of the night staff created the soundtrack I'd grown to love about nursing. But underneath that comfort, an undercurrent of had been building for weeks. Chloe was already at her workstation, fingers flying across the keyboard as she updated patient records. She looked up and smiled, the same warm, professional smile she'd given me thousands of times before. But something in her eyes seemed different, more guarded, as if she was calculating each interaction. "Morning, Jess," she called out, her voice carrying its usual cheerful tone. "Ready for another exciting day in paradise?" I returned her smile, but my instincts were sharpening. In healthcare, we learn to read subtle signs, changes in breathing patterns, shifts in skin color, the way a patient holds their body. Those same observational skills were now turning toward my colleagues, and what I was seeing didn't align with what I was hearing. The silence between us stretched just a moment too long, filled with an I couldn't yet name. The I'd felt that morning proved prophetic. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged that I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I wanted to trust my instincts were wrong. It started with Mrs. Henderson in room 314. During my shift change briefing with the day nurse, Amanda Kelly, she mentioned confusion about the patient's medication timing. The notes in Epic show her last dose was at 2 a.m., but Chloe's handoff report said 4 a.m., Amanda explained, pulling up the electronic record on her tablet. "That's a significant discrepancy for cardiac medications," I frowned, checking my own notes. I documented everything accurately. Let me verify with Chloe. When I approached Chloe about the discrepancy, she seemed genuinely surprised. "Oh, that must have been a typo in my verbal report. You know how hectic things get during shift change." Her explanation was reasonable, delivered with the same professional competence I'd always admired. But a small seed of doubt planted itself in my mind. The second incident occurred the following week. Mr. Rodriguez, a postoperative patient, had specific mobility restrictions that weren't communicated to the incoming day shift. Physical therapy arrived, expecting him to be cleared for walking, but his surgical notes clearly indicated bed rest for another 24 hours. The confusion delayed his care and created unnecessary stress for everyone involved. "I could have sworn I mentioned his mobility status during handoff," Chloe said when Dr. Patrick Kelly questioned the communication breakdown during our weekly team meeting. "Maybe it got lost in all the other details." Dr. Kelly's expression remained neutral, but I noticed him making notes in his tablet. Let's all double-check our handoff protocols. Patient safety depends on accurate information transfer. The third incident shattered any remaining benefit of the doubt I'd been giving Chloe. Mrs. Chen, a diabetic patient, had experienced a significant blood sugar drop during the night shift. I documented the episode thoroughly, including the interventions taken and her response to treatment. This information was crucial for the day shift to monitor her closely and adjust her care plan accordingly. But when I arrived for my next shift, Amanda Kelly pulled me aside with concern etched across her face. "Jessica, I need to ask you about Mrs. Chen's overnight care. There's no mention in the handoff notes about any blood sugar issues, but her morning labs show patterns consistent with a hypoglycemic episode." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I documented everything in Epic, and I specifically told Chloe about the incident during our shift change." We pulled up the electronic records together. My documentation was there, clear and comprehensive. But somehow, this critical information hadn't made it to the day shift through the verbal handoff process that Chloe managed. "This could have been dangerous," Amanda said quietly. "If we hadn't caught it through the lab work, we might have missed important signs of recurring hypoglycemia." That evening, I stayed late to review the past month's shift change documentation. The pattern became undeniable. Critical information was consistently being filtered out of verbal handoffs, while my electronic documentation remained accurate and complete. The common thread was Chloe's role as the intermediary between night and day shifts. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Chloe wasn't making innocent mistakes or dealing with information overload. She was deliberately withholding critical patient information during shift changes. But why would someone I trusted, someone who had supported me through my family crisis, sabotage patient care? I thought back to her behavior over the past few months. The guarded looks, the way she seemed to calculate her responses, the subtle changes in our interactions. Had she been planning this all along? Had her support during my family emergency been part of some larger manipulation? The questions multiplied, but one thing was clear. Patients were at risk because of deliberate professional misconduct. Every instinct I had as a nurse screamed that this couldn't continue. But confronting someone who had been both colleague and friend felt like stepping into a minefield. The next morning, I arrived early to review Mrs. Chen's overnight status. She was stable, but the potential consequences of missed communication haunted me. In healthcare, we often talk about near misses, situations where patient harm was narrowly avoided. This felt like something more sinister, deliberately created vulnerabilities in our care system. Chloe arrived for her shift with her usual professional demeanor, but I found myself studying her interactions with new eyes. The way she controlled information flow, the subtle authority she wielded over shift communications, the trust that everyone placed in her expertise with hospital systems. "Morning, Jess," she said, settling at her workstation. "Anything special I should know about for today's handoffs?" The irony of her question wasn't lost on me. She was asking me to trust her with information that I now suspected she might deliberately withhold from the people who needed it most. "Just the usual," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I'll make sure everything is documented thoroughly in Epic." Her smile seemed forced. "Of course. You're always so detail-oriented." As I prepared for another shift, the weight of my discovery settled heavily on my shoulders. The person I'd trusted most in our unit was systematically undermining patient care. The question now wasn't whether to, but how to expose the truth without compromising patient safety in the process. The silence between us had taken on a new meaning, not the comfortable quiet of trusted colleagues, but the tense stillness before a storm. The decision to report Chloe felt like crossing a bridge I could never return from. 3 days of careful observation had confirmed my worst fears. She was systematically filtering critical information during shift changes, creating dangerous gaps in patient care continuity. I scheduled a meeting with Patrick Kelly, our nurse manager, for Thursday morning. Patrick had been with Jade Mountain Hospital for over 15 years, building a reputation for fairness and thorough investigation of staff concerns. His office, tucked behind the main nursing station, felt like neutral territory. "Jessica, what can I do for you?" Patrick asked, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. His expression grew serious as I explained my observations about the missed communications and Chloe's role in information management. "These are serious allegations," he said after I finished. "Deliberately withholding patient information violates multiple hospital policies and professional standards. I need to ask, are you certain this isn't a misunderstanding or system error?" I handed him the documentation I'd compiled. timestamps from Epic showing when information was entered versus when it should have been communicated, shift reports that mysteriously omitted critical details, and a pattern of incidents that coincided with Chloe's oversight of handoff procedures. Patrick studied the papers carefully. This suggests systematic interference with care coordination. I'll need to involve risk management and potentially the chief nursing officer. Are you prepared for a formal investigation? The weight of that question settled over me. Formal investigations meant interviews, documentation reviews, and the possibility that my working relationship with Chloe, and potentially other colleagues, would be permanently altered. Patient safety has to come first, I replied. Within hours, the investigation machinery was in motion. Catherine Kelly from Risk Management arrived that afternoon, a sharp-eyed woman with 20 years of experience in healthcare compliance. She interviewed me privately, asking detailed questions about each incident I documented. We'll need to review system logs and interview other staff members, Catherine explained. This type of investigation requires discretion to protect both the integrity of the process and the individuals involved. The next few days felt surreal. Chloe continued her normal duties, seemingly unaware that her actions were under scrutiny. I found myself hypervigilant during every interaction, documenting everything while trying to maintain professional normalcy. Diana Kelly, one of our most experienced ICU nurses, approached me during a quiet moment on Friday evening. Jess, can we talk privately? We stepped into an empty patient room, and Diana's expression was troubled. I've been thinking about some things that didn't make sense before. Last month, I had a patient transfer that went sideways because critical lab values weren't communicated properly. Chloe was coordinating that handoff. My pulse quickened. What exactly happened? The receiving unit wasn't told about pending cardiac enzyme results. When they came back elevated, there was a delay in appropriate monitoring. The patient was fine, but it could have been serious. Diana paused. At the time, I assumed it was a communication breakdown. Now I'm wondering if it was something else. Diana's willingness to come felt like validation, but it also meant the scope of Chloe's actions might be broader than I'd initially realized. We agreed that Diana would document her concerns and share them with the investigation team. Monday brought an unexpected development. Patrick called me into his office with Catherine Kelly and Amanda Kelly, the chief nursing officer. Amanda's presence signaled that this had escalated to the highest levels of nursing leadership. Jessica, we've completed our preliminary review, Amanda began. The you provided, combined with system audits and additional staff interviews, support your concerns about deliberate interference with patient care communications. Catherine opened a thick folder. We've identified at least 6 incidents over the past 3 months, where critical information was available in the system but wasn't communicated during shift changes under Chloe's coordination. The pattern is too consistent to be accidental. Relief and sadness washed over me simultaneously. Relief that my concerns were being taken seriously. Sadness that someone I trusted had betrayed not just me, but the patients we were supposed to protect. What happens next? I asked. Chloe will be suspended pending a full investigation, Amanda replied. We're also implementing immediate changes to our handoff procedures to prevent this type of manipulation. You've potentially prevented serious patient harm by coming. The confrontation with Chloe came Tuesday morning. Patrick and Catherine called her into the conference room, and I was asked to be present as the reporting party. Chloe's face went pale when she saw the assembled group. Chloe, we need to discuss some concerns about information management during shift changes, Patrick began carefully. As the bill was presented, I watched Chloe's expression shift from confusion to defensive anger. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice rising. I've been nothing but professional. Jessica, how could you do this to me after everything I've done for you? The personal attack stung, but Catherine intervened smoothly. This isn't about personal relationships. It's about patient safety and professional standards. The documentation shows a clear pattern of withheld information. Chloe's defense crumbled as more was presented. System logs showed she had accessed patient information that was never communicated. Other staff members had come with similar experiences. The weight of was overwhelming. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, Chloe finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to be indispensable, to show that the unit needed me to function properly. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. She had deliberately created chaos to demonstrate her own importance, putting patients at risk to feed her professional ego. Your employment with Jade Mountain Hospital is terminated effective immediately, Amanda stated. We'll be reporting this to the Oregon State Board of Nursing for a review of your license. As Chloe gathered her belongings under security escort, I felt a complex mix of emotions. The person who had covered my shifts during my family emergency, who had seemed like a trusted colleague, had been systematically undermining patient care for months. Diana found me in the break room afterward. "You did the right thing," she said simply. "It couldn't have been easy." She was right. It hadn't been easy. But as I returned to the unit and saw the new communication protocols being implemented, as I watched information flow more transparently between shifts, I knew that patient safety was worth the personal cost. The investigation had revealed the truth, but the healing process for our unit was just beginning. 18 months later, I stood in the conference room at Portland General Hospital, presenting the final draft of our new workplace safety protocols to the nursing leadership team. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished table, where department heads from across the Pacific Northwest had gathered. The Jade Mountain incident taught us that professional sabotage in healthcare settings requires systematic prevention, I explained, clicking to the next slide. These protocols focus on early detection of information withholding and communication breakdowns. My new position as patient safety coordinator had emerged from the aftermath of Chloe's termination. When Jade Mountain's administration realized the scope of what had been happening, they'd asked me to help develop policies that prevent workplace sabotage in healthcare. The work had taken me beyond Greenstone Valley, consulting with hospitals throughout Oregon and Washington. Catherine Kelly, now the permanent nursing director at Jade Mountain, had become a close collaborator. She'd implemented our communication tracking system 6 months ago, and the results spoke for themselves. Shift change incidents had dropped by 70%, and staff satisfaction scores had reached their highest levels in years. The key is creating transparency without creating surveillance, I continued. Staff need to feel trusted while maintaining accountability for patient information sharing. After the presentation, I drove back through the familiar mountain passes toward Greenstone Valley. Jade Mountain Hospital came into view as I rounded the final curve, its windows reflecting the afternoon light. I still worked there 2 days a week, maintaining my clinical skills while developing the safety programs. Diana Martinez had been promoted to charge nurse, and she'd transformed the unit culture. The new staff members she'd hired brought fresh energy, and the communication protocols we'd developed had become the standard across the hospital system. The Oregon State Board of Nursing had suspended Chloe's license for 2 years, requiring extensive remedial education before she could practice again. I'd heard through professional networks that she'd left healthcare entirely, taking a position in medical device sales. Sometimes I wondered if she understood the full impact of her actions, but I'd learned to focus on prevention rather than dwelling on past betrayals. My phone buzzed with a text from Patrick Chen, one of the new nurses on the unit. "Mrs. Thompson, from room 312, asked me to thank you for the discharge planning help. She said you made her feel heard." These moments reminded me why I'd stayed in healthcare despite everything. The work itself remained meaningful, even when the people around it sometimes failed. As I pulled into the hospital parking garage, I reflected on how much had changed. The hypervigilance that had consumed me during those difficult months had gradually faded, replaced by a more sustainable awareness. I'd learned to trust again, but with better boundaries and clearer expectations. The evening shift was gathering for report as I walked through the unit. The new communication boards displayed patient information clearly, and I could hear the structured handoff conversations that had become routine. No more whispered concerns or missing details. No more wondering what critical information might be slipping through the cracks. I stopped by Diana's office before leaving. "How did the new protocol training go today?" "Excellent," she said, looking up from her computer. "The staff really understand why these systems matter. They've seen the difference it makes." Walking to my car as the sun set behind the mountains, I felt the quiet satisfaction of work well done. The betrayal that had shattered my trust in workplace relationships had ultimately led to something larger. A systematic approach to preventing the kind of professional sabotage that puts patients at risk. The parking lot was peaceful in the evening light, and for the first time in months, I didn't find myself scanning for signs of deception or hidden agendas. The healing process had been gradual, but it was complete. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.